I'm never ashamed to tell anybody that I'm dyslexic and I have ADHD. And the reason why I'm not is because I want them to understand that it's nothing to be ashamed of.
Good afternoon, Stephen.
How's it going, Sheridan?
Good. How about you?
Doing well. Got another Friday under our belt, another week, moving forward. Well, this is a special Friday because this is the first Friday in October, which October is Dyslexia Awareness Month. Which I kind of say that tongue in cheek because I'm sure it's the same way in your household and growing up. Dyslexia awareness is not a month in our family, it's every day.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's every day, every hour, the whole life.
Right. So, I mean, we got to, I honestly think that we need to start, while you can never have as much or have enough awareness, because there's always people starting on this journey, right? I think now we need to go to dyslexia action. Now,
Definitely.
what do we do? We've been made aware. I mean, we've known about dyslexia since 1881. So that's what, 143 years, something like that. So for the most of us, we are aware of what dyslexia is and the struggles that come with it. Now,
Absolutely.
I think I would say that that's where awareness really starts to take a kind of a murky step. The reason why I say it's kind of murky is because I've seen over the years of doing advocacy work that you really have, I would say there's really three main thought processes when it comes to dyslexia awareness. There's the parents, like we were at one point in time, like you will be. Hopefully you won't be because you've been in this your entire life, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that would end up saying, look, I don't know what is true and what is not. I'm just trying to find information. Right? I don't care if it's good or bad or whatever. I just want to know what can I do to help my child. So there's one line of thinking, right? And they are taking in everything that they could possibly think about, right? Or any information that we get. Then we have the parents that are a group of line of thinking that all they want is the most relevant information, the most studied, correct information, and leave everything else out.
Yeah.
And I think the third, and it has its place, is let's look at it's more of a social emotional advocacy, right? And really it stems from parents or adults who are dyslexic that, lived in the shadows their entire life and they hurt, so they don't want to hurt anymore. They don't want to live in the shadows anymore. So what's the best thing to do? The best thing to do is to come out and talk about all the good, the positive sides, or what they see as being positive.
Yeah. How do we?
What do you think? What's your ideas of that?
I think that there's definitely, definitely people that want to focus on the positives because there's a lot of negativity associated with dyslexia, and it's real easy to get kind of caught in that downward spiral of negative thinking. And so be it from their own past experiences or just what they've seen of others, and they'll do anything that they can to make sure that that's not the experience that their child has. And I think you're absolutely correct. There's some that They just want to know what is the most accurate information and what is the best methodology to go forward and help their child, help themselves, help their adult, whoever it may be. And I think you're very right on the point that there's others that they just want any information. There's not enough information out there for them that they're still having to hunt more than they should have to find information about dyslexia. And I think there's probably a fourth group as well that they aren't as concerned with what I think it's kind of a hybrid group between the ones that want the best information and those that want the information that's going to be the most positive. And I think there's kind of a sweet spot in there that you could form a group out of, that they're just looking for the best of both of those worlds. What is the most positive for their child, but also what is kind of the best methodology. What do you think about that?
Let me answer your question with a question. You've been, obviously, you're dyslexic, I'm dyslexic, your dad's dyslexic. Growing up in this, what did you see as the positive side to being dyslexic?
Say the positives. I'd say that it was a unique, feature or quirk about you. It kept you from being quite the same as everyone else. But, when you struggle in certain areas, you're going to focus more of your energy in other areas that you're naturally stronger in. So to a degree, I felt like one of the strengths or benefits was, this slightly different thinking process. I wouldn't go as far as to say it was any sort of superpower or anything like that, but it was definitely kind of, you naturally were forced to kind of go about things a different or roundabout way. You didn't follow the beaten path that everyone else has been taking. Now, at the same time, I definitely saw that as, a downside, because I might be taking 3 times as long to do my English homework as my classmates.
So would you say that is that idea or that mindset? Would you say that is, let me back up. So what you just described is something that I like to call the water theory.
Mm-hmm.
So water will take the path of least resistance,
mm-hmm.
right? And it may just be a trickle at first. Well, the more water that happens, the more erosion that happens, the faster that water gets going, the more water and it cuts into anything. It can cut through just about anything there is, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's kind of silly, but I look at dyslexia very similar. And when we start talking about all of these positives or these other type of
strengths or benefits,
weaknesses, skills that we learn,
mm-hmm.
I think that is like the path of least resistance, and
mm-hmm.
we become very good at that because we're trying to get the information the same way anybody else in the classroom is. So what do? We have to hone our listening skills. We have to hone our memory skills. We have to hone all these other survival skills because we've been put into an environment that at that point in time we're physically enabled to be successful. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm.
So I think the first thing that I personally would love to do is start a conversation about what is and what is not dyslexia.
Mm-hmm.
What truly is a dyslexic trait and what is not a dyslexic trait. Because when I look at those two things, I don't find anything positive about not knowing how to read.
Mm-hmm.
Reading and spelling, especially in today's world. I can't find any positive about not having the ability to read or spell. Especially when you're in a school environment. It gets even worse when you get into work, into life. Now, are there a lot of other skills and strategies and survival techniques that we learn because of that struggle? Absolutely. But the real question is, of those things that you started talking about, you saw as a positive for dyslexia, I guess my question then comes back, do you feel like somebody that doesn't have dyslexia would not be able to have those same skills or even acquire those same skills?
Absolutely not. Yeah. I think anyone could acquire those skills. It just takes, practice and putting some effort and energy into thinking about things more than one way, or not just being satisfied with the immediate thought process you have on something and challenging yourself to think about it other ways.
I mean, if we really change the narrative and we change how we look at dyslexia and the fact that dyslexia is a reading disability, it is what it is. We got to call it what it is. We have to label it, because if you don't label it, you're not able to find the appropriate remediation or treatment, if you want to use that word, for it. So, over my years, my advocacy has really changed, right? Because I didn't have that much knowledge when I first started, and I thought, and I don't know if you went through this too, but I thought at this point in my life, this is as good as it's going to get. So I just need to learn how to deal with it and move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Did you experience anything similar to like that?
Similar, yes. Definitely, it's a bit different for me, having gotten remediation at such a young age. I was only in third and fourth grade, so 9 years old, I think it was, maybe 7, 8, around then. So I didn't have too much of an experience really in school feeling as though I was, really struggling that much. Now, the number one thing that determines the progress you make with these programs is how much effort you put in. Now, being a child with ADHD, effort and academics were always a challenge. So I definitely did not take as much of an advantage of the programs as I could have at that age, which definitely brought about later in life, kind of the sense that, okay, this is as good as it's going to get. There were still areas that I struggled with a bit. And it wasn't really until I became an instructor and started, revisiting the programs and, having to be trained in them and go back through them a second time, essentially, that I really feel like I saw improvement at that point, just getting that kind of booster, what, over 10 years later. And so in that sense, up until that point, I had felt like that was as good as it was going to get. I was still going to struggle sometimes. I still have to use, spell check to go back over my work and make sure that I didn't misspell some things, but that was as good as it was going to be.
So you're in a kind of an interesting position because, like you were saying, you were remediated early on. And I think kind of what you're describing, though, is part of it is just immaturity.
Yeah.
I can tell you for a fact, if I would have went through a program like now, or anything similar at that age, I don't think I had the maturity at that point to really understand that. Yes, the more I put into it, the better I get. The quicker I get remediated, the faster I can move on, and I never have to think about dyslexia again. But my question really is, since you've seen all sides of this, right? You've seen I was remediated at a young age. I still struggled in school. I still felt those pain points that dyslexics see and feel. Then you came back as an adult, got trained in the same program that you went through originally. How does that look from your side to then deliver said program, same one that you were remediated at first, and now you can see the holes not only in yourself but in the children?
It's interesting too, because at that point then you're able to kind of add a personal experience to it and kind of recognize possible thought processes that the student may be having that you, based upon thought processes you had yourself going through this stuff, and areas that maybe you recognize were difficult for yourself. You can recognize, oh, this is what I was confused about then. Maybe that applies here. But at the same time, like you said, it does help you to kind of recognize where some of the struggles are a bit more too. Because you're more cognizant of those struggles for yourself. Now you're going to recognize them elsewhere. The biggest piece that I think of is the grammar piece for me was recognizing the differences in grammar structure and stuff and revisiting that at a much older age. I don't think I went through that program as far based upon my age at the time. So at this point, grammar, I was definitely getting into material and parts of grammar that are far beyond what I ever went through in the programs. And that was where I noticed the biggest difference. And at that point, then you're kind of almost in uncharted territory there with the students. So,
I guess my next question would be, because you've seen it from multiple different angles, if tomorrow you walked in and you had little Sheridan Conway as your student, because this is Dyslexia Awareness Month, what is your advocacy? What is your awareness? What is your knowledge that you're going to share with that little Sheridan Conway? What advice do you have for him?
Just to take everything that you learn, to heart. Don't brush things off as, whatever, the adults are telling me this stuff and trying to get me to practice these things, but whatever. It doesn't make that big of a deal to me right in this very moment. So not gonna think about it too much for the long run. And I would just advise that ignore those thoughts. When you have those thoughts, go the other way, because whatever you practice is only going to be beneficial. And unless you're practicing something the wrong way. Even then, practice is practice. But
Angela brings up a great point. Why be scared to tell others of who or what you are? While she is correct in saying that dyslexia does not go away, we're not doing gene therapy, right?
Yeah.
However, the great thing there is our brains are not hardwired. That's where that neuroplasticity comes in. The ability to can make new connections in the brain. So the fact that we have neuroplasticity and we can learn new skills, we can be taught to read and spell like non-dyslexics, as well as non-dyslexics. But you brought up a great point, which is once we've gone through remediation and we're truly remediated, now is where the work really starts. Because now is where the practice makes perfect really comes in, right? So that's what you're talking about. The more you read, the better you get, the faster you get. The more you're working with spelling, the better you get, the faster you get. So, that's the point that I really want to hit home. While yes, we are going to be dyslexic for life. In Texas, the law about dyslexia is once dyslexic, always dyslexic. I have no qualms about that, and truly believe that line of thinking up until the point that I was remediated myself. Does that mean I don't have dyslexia anymore? No. I have 2 of my 3 boys have dyslexia, and guess what? The chances of me having grandkids who are dyslexic and great-grandkids that are dyslexic, the percentage is through the roof. I wish I had that same chances in winning the lottery.
Yeah, me too.
So while I'm never ashamed to tell anybody that I'm dyslexic and I have ADHD, and the reason why I'm not is because I want them to understand that it's nothing to be ashamed of. And it really it sets expectation a little bit also, because if you go into your teacher's classroom and you say, hey, look, before they know it, hey, I'm dyslexic, I just want to let you know, and you have that self-advocacy piece of it, you're building that. Really, that's the thing that we want to push our kids into doing, is being a self-advocate. And then that follows you all the way through life. So never be afraid of saying you're dyslexic or you have ADHD or whatever, right? At that point, it is what it is. Now, what are we going to do from here on out is the real question. So I'll pose that to you. What are we going to, we've known about dyslexia for 143 years or a little more. What more are we going to do, or how can we get out there and help our dyslexic community more?
Well, Stephen, I see now I missed some comments. So, Michael, thank you so much. I hope you and the family are doing fantastic. And Stephen, looking towards the future, what we can do for the dyslexia community as a whole. I think the number one thing is there's still a big piece for, and I hate this word, but dispersing accurate information and kind of dispelling myths. And that even to this day, I still, in speaking with people will tell me, oh, dyslexia, I thought that just meant you saw words backwards, and how many decades has it been since that myth was dispelled? And there are lots of people that still believe that. And that stems, I think, just from in the dyslexic community, there's a lot of information out there, but I feel like it's still accurate information has not been dispersed en masse enough. So I think there's a big role for just dispersion of up-to-date, accurate information about what is dyslexia. In addition to that, I think that in this day and age, cost is a extremely limiting factor for millions, if not billions, of people around the world to seek any sort of dyslexia services. So I think ultimately being able to bring these services to the masses at the lowest possible cost is, ideally just getting the right teaching methods into the schools would be phenomenal. But that's a whole challenge on its own that I don't want to get started talking on that.
Yeah. One of the things that I hear often, and this goes right in line with Dyslexia Awareness Month, is things that are said about dyslexia. So you mentioned one of them, that you flip letters around. And I think if we, the dyslexic community, can then turn around and go, while yes, there are people that have issues with their eyes, convergence issues, and it flips the letters around, or their eyes can't focus or track very well. And at that point, it makes it look like the words are moving on the page, and we hear that about dyslexia. It's awesome. I would caution our families out there to really look at what is a true symptom of dyslexia and what is a comorbidity. Because you could have convergence or tracking issues and be dyslexic. They're not exclusive. So with me saying that, meaning just because you're saying my B's and D's are flipped around, or the words are moving, or whatever, that's not dyslexia. Right? Or my child is so smart. I couldn't tell you how many Facebook posts I read where they start out with, my child is so smart. Yes, your child is smart. Dyslexia has nothing to do with how smart you are. Now, it'll make you feel dumb, but it has no bearing on how intelligent you are, or that you can or can't learn. I always struggle with the word learning disability, because I was like, I don't have a disability in learning. But at that point, I really did. I had to come to terms with, in this small silo, which was reading and language, I have a disability in that. Everything else, I'm good. So really taking a look at that and making sure that our kids understand that that is just factual information.
And Stephen, I think I want to highlight something you just said about that intelligence has no correlation with dyslexia. I feel like that is a big piece of this, stigma that there is about dyslexia, that kind of, one, leads to misconceptions, but two, also kind of reinforces in people's mindsets that they don't want to identify as dyslexic.
Yeah.
And
they don't want to take on the negative pieces of it. Unfortunately, in life, if you're gonna take all of the stereotypes of dyslexia, you got to take the good with the bad.
Yeah.
You can't cherry pick it, right? While I can't remember what the statistic is that 30-something% of all dyslexics are entrepreneurs. Well, 50% in prison have dyslexia too. So we can't have one without the other. I mean, if we're going to say that just because you're dyslexic, you're going to be an entrepreneur, well, through just statistics,
yeah,
you have a higher chance of being in prison.
Oh yeah.
Again, that's not saying that just because you have dyslexia, you're going to prison. But I make that point to say we got to look at what truly is a dyslexic trait. What is the definition of dyslexia, and what is not. That's my personal opinion. Your thoughts?
When I think of the future of dyslexia awareness, I can't help but think about the informational campaign that has been going on for, gosh, I don't know, the last 10 or 20 years in the autism community. I think that's kind of a great path to possibly follow, about how there historically has been so much, misinformation or negative information and beliefs about autism. And today, I don't think that's quite the case. Definitely not the same as it was 10 or 20 years ago. And so I think if there's any path that should be definitely considered to help inform people, I think that, following that similar path would be beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, I just wish we could all sides, right? Those silos that we were talking about of people searching for information. I wish we could all come together and understand that what we're all fighting for is this exact same thing, which is we don't want our babies to grow up hurting, failing, and as good parents, our job is to make sure that our children don't struggle as much as we did. That's our hope in life, that we are good enough parents that our children aren't going to struggle in school or in life like we did. Now, with that being said, we have to make sure that the ultimate goal is to make sure our babies get the help that they need. But they're not going to get the help they need if we're bickering about dyslexia can be cured, or even diminished some with a light bulb or a pair of glasses, or pick a device that somebody has decided that they're going to market to the dyslexia community. I mean, this is one of the reasons why your dad and I actually became so close, because of this, because of who I am, and I'm out there fighting for our dyslexic families, our dyslexic children. I mean, that's when I called your dad and told him he was selling snake oil.
Yeah.
Because it was right around the same time that there was some guys from Europe that were promoting a new light and some glasses and something else, and I had just had enough. Right? I'm like, no, all we need to do is teach these kids to read. Don't tell me anything about a light, a magic pill, a pair of glasses, color overlays, sit with a book on your head, any of that stuff. What I want to know is, do you know how to teach our kids to read? And if you don't have any proof or backing of what you're saying about teaching our kids to read, I'm done with you. I don't want to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like I said, that's the reason why I called your dad and said, hey, you're selling snake oil.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you out here trying to hurt our families? Where's your proof? And I think if more of us took a stand like that and held these people that are providing services at a higher standard, and if they're not getting it, if your child is in remediation for 8 years, something's not going right. I mean, I commend some of these parents for having the tenacity to stick with it. I don't know that I could.
I know I definitely couldn't as a student. If you told me I was gonna have to keep going to tutoring for 8 years and oh, it's working, it's working. Let me tell you, I would hope that maybe after a few months, but probably more than likely after a few years is when I would think that as a student, I would start to question, is this really helping me?
Well,
If it's taken this long and I still feel like I'm struggling, is this worth it?
I mean, I went through that same thought process when I went through now.
Mm-hmm.
Because at that point, I got to face the 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is, your dad, Dr. Conway, said that he can remediate me and don't worry about it. He can do this and he can do that. Well,
Mm-hmm.
now I got to face what if it doesn't work?
Mm-hmm.
I've made it this far in life and just, stumbling over myself, just making it through life, and hadn't thought about really dyslexia until my kids were diagnosed with it. And at this point, now I'm going to go back and open up this fresh wound of, can I be taught to read and spell like a non-dyslexic?
Mm-hmm.
That was tough. I mean, I almost think it was tougher for adults than it is for kids, because you know what that means at the end of the day.
Oh yeah.
If it doesn't work for you, and you feel like you put all of your effort into it, well, then you at that point you feel like you are as dumb as what everybody said you were.
Mm-hmm.
That type of mentality, and that nobody wants that. Adult or kid.
Yeah, I think that's why it's so important that the information be, not just disseminated, but highlighted and reinforced by as many people as possible that, dyslexia and IQ have absolutely no correlation. Your ability to read has no correlation to how smart intellectually you are or not. You can be, there are countless people who were, recorded in history as being dyslexic. I want to correct me if I'm wrong. I believe Einstein was dyslexic. I mean, these are brilliant people. And now, I don't know if we could confirm that or not.
But
But
I
I
think
think it's a great case.
that's where you start seeing the dyslexia traits or dyslexia
Yeah.
patterns,
Mhm.
right? There's a lot of people that famous people, very intelligent people that we hear all the time. There's Albert Einstein, Leonardo da Vinci, Steve
Mhm.
Jobs, I believe somebody had said Bill Gates.
It's not enough just to say, here's some really intelligent people that were dyslexic. I think it takes more than just that to really impact those struggling with dyslexia, especially those who haven't had any sort of successful remediation. No matter what, at the end of the day, you can tell them, you can put a poster on their wall of, some genius that had dyslexia. That might make them feel a little bit better, but anytime they're not looking at that poster and they're struggling to write a sentence or struggling to remember how do you spell this word, and especially in a classroom setting where, they have peers all around them. And I think that is a whole nother piece that, it goes beyond those that actually even have dyslexia. This kind of information needs to be disseminated to all so that those that are dyslexic aren't faced with those situations where someone might, make a comment to them or suggest that they aren't smart because they can't spell a word. And just avoid those kind of traumatic childhood situations and adult situations altogether.
Well, what I like to say when people start bringing up the laundry list of famous people who are dyslexic, well, they're all great. I mean, it feels good to have something in common with, that level of intelligence, right? However, I will also say that I have the data to back it up? No, but I truly believe the reason for those people's success. This is a blanket statement, broad statement. I understand. I'm doing exactly what I hate when people do, but just saying that I would say the great majority of those famous people that are, successful, their support system that they had around them in order to foster that success was more than what normal everyday people have. Dyslexic or not dyslexic. Yeah. So that plays a big role in it too. I mean,
for sure.
You're not going to just sit here and say, "Oh, well, I'm dyslexic. Okay, well, I'm going to be the next Steve Jobs or Leonardo da Vinci or whatever." Unless I have the support, unless I have, putting myself into that, whatever it is that I'm trying to be, the next greatest at, it's not going to happen. Right? There's no magic wand that's going to wave over your head and say you're successful.
Yeah.
So,
especially not in today's world.
So really, to put this back on a happier note, the great thing is for dyslexia awareness is be aware that we can teach you to read and spell like non-dyslexics. That's the great news. And at that point, just like I told my boys, at that point, you can go off to college as they both did. And you can turn around and never think about dyslexia if you never want to again. Or you can continue to advocate just like your dad is doing. But what you have to do, being dyslexic, is get out there and advocate for everybody. Because those of us who are dyslexic will have dyslexic children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, so on and so forth. So those of us that have made it to the adult stage in life, it's our job to make sure that our community is getting the help that they need.
Absolutely. I think that's also that's a very important piece, Stephen, that, it's very easy once your skills have been improved, to, just kind of forget that and not think about it. And at that point, you're really doing a disservice to those that are still struggling with it. And like you said, like your future children, grandchildren, so on, you know, dyslexia is genetic. I have it, my sister has it, my father has it. There's a pretty good chance that my children are going to have it, my sister's children are going to have it, your kids' children are going to have it, you know, and it's just a tree that's ever continuously widening, you know.
Yeah.
And so it's our responsibility as those who have received successful remediation to continue to spread the awareness that, we have something we can do about it. We can help you. We can make things better. It's not impossible. It's not some great unknown, you know.
But the other piece of it is, I know that a lot of people are scared that if they go through remediation, when they hear remediation, the word
Yeah.
remediation is scary to them because they think, well, I don't want to lose who I am right now.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I can understand that line of thinking,
Mm-hmm.
but that line, I would say that line of thinking is really coming from the idea that because I'm dyslexic, I have these other traits. That
Mm-hmm.
those traits go away when I become not dyslexic. Well,
Yeah.
we've already talked about that. It's genetic. We're going to be dyslexic.
Mm-hmm.
It is what it is. But just know that with the amount of knowledge that we have now, we can continue to push forward and we can get our community the help that they need. We don't have to worry about this anymore. We don't have to fight this fight anymore.
And I think there's another piece to that that's deserves some credit. That I think that, not only is it potentially that people may be worried that, getting services or improving their skills might change who they are, might also be stemming from, just the fear of potentially, are expectations going to be raised for me? And what if I can't meet those expectations? Like I'm already struggling to meet the current expectations. And to that degree, I can very much, associate and understand that. But at the same time, I think of, those memories when I'm sitting at the kitchen table, in tears, trying to write an essay that I've been sitting there trying to write for the last 4 hours. When I think of those memories, the only thing that I would consider about changing my skills is how. Yes, how can I do that? Because in those moments, you'll do anything to make it easier.
So as you were sitting there talking about that, I would say let's throw a caveat on that thought process. You going through remediation is absolutely 100% going to change you.
Mm-hmm.
You want it to change.
Yeah.
That's the reason why you're going through remediation. So to sit back and go, well, I don't want to do remediation because I don't want to change who I am, is not the proper thought process. It's I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to go through remediation because I want to make the best version of myself.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, I can go out and help others be the best version of themselves also.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming up on our hour mark. These things go by pretty quick.
Yeah.
I'd like to know, I'm gonna throw it at you.
Mm-hmm.
What's your best advice, or what's your gold nugget of advice for our families that are out there struggling to figure out what's going on?
Look for the science, and look for the evidence. Demand the evidence. If someone can't give you the evidence behind their method or their theory or their process and prove to you that, hey, this is replicable, we've had success in the past, look at, boom, 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 then look somewhere else. Demand the science, demand the evidence. Don't settle for empty promises.
100%. Couldn't said it better. So I'll end with my piece of advice is always, if you suspect that your child is struggling, you suspect a disability, they're struggling, go get them tested. If you can't afford to go to a private neuropsych or anything like that, go to your local ISD. If you're homeschooling, you pay taxes into an ISD. They're still responsible for testing your child. Go get your child tested. Figure out what's going on. And then let's make a game plan on how do we get your child the most relevant, most tested methodology to allow them to become the best versions of themselves. So I'll let you wrap it up and have that last word.
Well, thank you, Stephen. Thank you for coming on here and having this great conversation. And, folks, I just ask that you all continue to help spreading dyslexia awareness.
Absolutely. Well,
Right.
See you next week.
See you next week. Take care, Stephen.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.